Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask, hey Jason, is it true that lifting weights improves bone density, and does bone density help reduce injuries and stuff like that, or is this just a myth? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this for a minute. Is this a myth? Absolutely. This is absolutely not a myth. And yeah, there's tons of medical evidence out there talking to us about bone density, hip fractures, injuries, things like that. That is considered to be one of the negative effects of getting older, of aging, is bone demineralization. And when it becomes serious, we refer to it as osteoporosis. Now, there's other types of things similar like osteoarthritis where it involves more of around just near the joints and things. But osteoporosis in general covers your bone demineralization. And as most of you know, hopefully know, this happens as you age. And you guys all know that you've got a grandma or a great aunt or someone there who's had a major hip fracture and stuff. And hip fractures are one of the most common injuries that happen as we get older. And it has to do with us losing bone mass. Your bones are made primarily, they get their weight, their mass, from calcium and magnesium. All right, two basic minerals, but that is what holds your structure up. These two minerals are very strong when they bond certain ways. It can form almost metal-like strength. All right, in terms of compressive stress, bone materials is as strong as far as being able to take compressive stress. It is as strong as steel. It's not as strong as far as like breaking stress this direction, but compressing it, it is. It's about half as strong as steel the other direction, when it's formed correctly, when it's mineralized correctly. And again, that's what forms our whole structure. Our whole body is kind of built around this, our skeleton, which is again, a calcium and magnesium metal-like framework, really. Now, again, as we age, we tend to lose mass in our bones. There's things you can do to prevent this. Obviously, people talk about calcium and magnesium supplements, but truth be told, they don't really help that much, not as much as, say, vitamin D3 supplementation does, which is, again, one of the reasons we talk about things like vitamin D3 as far as different skin tones that you have, the amount of pigment that you have in your skin versus how dark of an area you live in. Because, vitamin D affects a lot of things. It affects energy, depression. It can affect your sex hormones, even your testosterone, estrogen, everything. Low vitamin D levels are associated with all sorts of negatives in your hormones, including, again, depression, loss of sex drive, loss of energy. But it also is a major factor in bone demineralization because vitamin D3 helps your body mineralize your bones. And again, as we get older, our bones tend to demineralize. Now, that leads to, again, these hip fractures and things. The reason hip fractures are so common is that when we fall down, it's really common to hit a hip. All right, look at the shape of the hip bone. You've got a really strong, normally when you're healthy and young, that's a very, very strong joint that takes a lot of load, a lot of work. But as you get older, if you start to demineralize, that area takes just as much work. It takes just as much of your body weight, so it has a lot of stress on it day to day. But because of the shape of it, there are delicate parts to it. If it gets hit at the wrong angle, it tends to shatter, it tends to break. So, loss of bone density is associated with a very, very large increase in hip fractures. Now, the other thing is people falling down or getting hit in general, your bone density, which is again how many minerals you have in there, is a major factor in how injured you get and how easily your bones break if you get hit by a car, you fall down, you get hit with an object, anything. These things break bones all the time, but your bone density affects this to a very, very large extent. Now, we know that the best way to improve bone density outside of basically getting enough minerals in your diet, having enough D3 in your system, which could be either from getting enough sunlight, but remember, too much sunlight for your skin tone also equals skin cancer and melanomas and things. But these are factors, but load-bearing exercises is one of the most important factors, if not the single most important factor. That other stuff matters, but maybe not quite as much. This is one reason heavier people, fatter people, sometimes have better bone density. They have less bone breaks. Why? Because they're carrying around extra weight all the time. Also, people who eat more food, which if you're fat, you eat more food. Don't let anyone convince you that they got fat while starving themselves. They ate very, very little food and they got fat. That's bullshit. That's a lie, and those people know better than it. Anyone who studied it knows that doesn't really happen. All right, that doesn't happen under normal circumstances. Even a slow thyroid is not going to let you be 80 pounds overweight while eating very small amounts of food. They overeat. So you combine overeating, which again is going to contribute to having more minerals available in your diet because you eat more, combined with carrying around extra weight tends to give them better bone mineralization. Now, before people jump up and say, aha, that means being really fat's healthy, well, no, it comes at the expense of diabetes, heart attack, stroke, higher cancer rate, all that stuff. But they don't break bones as easy. But you can get the same benefits by lifting weights. In fact, you can probably improve upon those benefits. Now, people will say, well, I don't understand. How does lifting weights increase bone density? That doesn't even make sense. Yeah, of course it does. Everyone who's out there who lifts thinks about the little micro tears you get in your muscle fibers, right? People talk about this all the time. Well, you get these little micro tears in the muscle and your body adapts by making it thicker so that it doesn't tear them completely. All right, so people get that concept. Well, that's even with something pushing and pulling. Now stop and think about heavy weight being loaded on the bone. You don't think that puts any stress on the bone? Think about that. You think a heavy deadlift or a heavy squat doesn't put stress on your bones? Of course it does. It's putting compressive stress on it. Sometimes it puts even shearing stress on it. That stress, you've got to think about it. You think of your bones as like this big lattice of really, really strong stone. Because it's very stone-like in a lot of ways. If you think about it, if you've ever picked up a bone and messed with it, it really is. It's a hard, rigid, immovable structure. But your bones do move just a little bit. They warp a little. But when they bend or they're compressed too much, they get little cracks in them. Just like those micro tears you think of in the muscles, you get micro fractures, little tiny, tiny microscopic cracks through the bone that you can only see with a microscope. Because they're, again, micro fractures. Smaller than the visible eye can detect. All right, so how does your body respond to those micro fractures? Well, assuming it has the extra minerals and food and everything available to do it, it fills those cracks back in. All right, so you have this structure that is sometimes kind of loose. It's porous. Bone is porous and spongy, but the whole material is made out of this really, really hard minerals. Well, if you get little cracks through the spongy different parts, the parts of it that are slightly thin, parts of it that aren't quite as solid, you get little cracks through there. What do you think your body does? It fills them in with more calcium and magnesium. But here's the thing. Just like with other stuff, your body compensates. You know how, you get a micro tear in a muscle, it builds it back a little tiny bit bigger and thicker, right? So that you don't get those tears again. When you get a cut or something somewhere, when you get a scab, what does your body do? Builds a scar over it. That scar is sometimes stronger than the original skin was, right? It's a little thicker. It's a little tougher. I mean, anyone who has a scar knows that. Well, the same thing happens with those little cracks in your bones. Your body fills those in with a little bit more minerals. It puts just a little bit more calcium and magnesium that was in that particular crack than before. Why? Because it doesn't want you to crack it again. And that's your body's way of saying, okay, this has happened. It's got this little micro crack. Let me fill this in. Just a couple % stronger than it used to be. And that way it won't happen again. Then we won't have this little tiny injury. And then you lift again, and it does the same thing. And you keep doing the same thing for months, after month after month, year after year. You keep filling in those little cracks until they get a little stronger, full of a little more minerals than they had before. What is the effect? You start adding bone weight to that bone. It starts adding more calcium and magnesium than it originally had. And I mean, if you do this 500 times you put little micro cracks in the bones, and it adds just a fraction more of those heavy minerals, calcium and magnesium in there than it had before. Eventually the weight of that bone is going to go up measurably, right? Because it keeps adding them. If you were to weigh that bone on a scale, it will have gained weight, but it's still the same size bone on the outside, which means it has more density. There's more minerals packed internally through that spongy lattice work all through there. It's got less holes in it, and it's got more tough stuff in it. That makes it stronger. It makes it harder to break. If you've done it 500 times, it's going to get noticeably stronger, noticeably heavier, noticeably harder to break. So when people say, does lifting weights increase bone density? Yes. Does increasing bone density reduce the chance of injuries? Yeah, it even reduces the chances of injuries lifting weights. That's what your body's trying to do. It is taking the stress that you subjected to and it's afraid you're going to break that bone. So it makes it stronger to keep you from doing so. Now, if you have a bone that's stronger and able to handle twice as much weight now without cracking or breaking, doesn't it stand to reason that if you fall down, that same bone can handle twice as much force before it breaks? You get hit by a car that's putting a certain amount of force on a bone, doesn't that mean it's going to have to hit you twice as hard to break it than it would have before? Or if you get hit with any object, it doesn't matter whether it's a fist, a bat, a rock, a tree falling on you, it doesn't matter. The idea is the same. The bone is now stronger and harder to break. That's a good thing. It is never, ever a bad thing for you as a person to have bones that are harder to break. I mean, when you think about that, just the slips and falls that happen in day-to-day life, even people who aren't in any areas where they're at risk of being violently attacked with something or run over by a car, because you avoid those things, people still slip and fall down. It's always a good thing to have bones that are harder to break. And weightlifting has been documented and proven to do just that through the mechanism through which I just described. So it is absolutely not a myth. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.